AI dummies, or for nano dummies. The initial idea is to get our nano participants familiar with some AI aspects, some fundamental things, some terminology, and to do it in the most simplest way. And I only invite our first participant. This is Mariam Izoeva with NLP for different biomedical applications. Please. Just let me remind you that we have 5 minutes, usually in English. Then so we can start. Now, as you wish. You can be here or there.
I'm going to present natural language processing for biomedical applications. NLP today is a major frontier of artificial intelligence, and with recent statistical and neural revolutions, the research community have made great strides on many fronts, such as machine translation, speech recognition, question answering, language modeling. NLP can be used in different biomedical applications because the amount of unstructured data produced by research is growing every day, and efficient methods of its processing are needed. With most of the unstructured data being in textual format, NLP can give tools for solving different tasks, and the bulk of biomedicine is conducted and recorded in natural language. For example, PubMed, which is a popular resource, adds 2 biomedical papers every minute, and thousands every day, and over 1 million every year. So a large number of biological information is scattered in all kinds of studies. So handling this biomedical literature could extract more biological information and discover new biomedical knowledge. So, and manual processing is not appropriate here. So, biomedical literature can be seen as a large unstructured data repository. Similarly, there are also 2 million new cancer patients in the US and 17 million worldwide every year. So, medical record typically comprises hundreds of clinical notes. To create personalized, data-centric precision medicine, it is imperative to develop NLP methods. So, text mining has emerged as a potential solution to achieve knowledge for bridging between the free text and structured representation of biomedical information using artificial intelligence. You can see some of the most popular tasks here. They also include more low-level tasks such as morphological and syntax analysis, tokenization, etc. One of the examples of such text mining systems is IDLX. The interface is quite common. There are many such systems, but this is a great example. A user browses an input document from the collection and fills out an output form. And these fields are filled in automatically. The authors report 95% on the F1 score, and inside the system, hidden markup models and vector semantics are used, along with algorithms of part of speech tagging, keywords identification, and indexing. Another important task is text categorization. This is how the system works inside. Here, classical algorithms like SVM show results, and deep learning models are also used. One of the aspects which make biomedical text processing complicated is vocabulary, as it's different from like general text on which most popular deep learning models are trained. So one of the recent models which leverage on the usage of extended vocabulary is the one developed by Microsoft. It's called PubMed. It's trained on the PubMed database, and it's based on the popular BERT model. It's one of the most famous language models in NLP. So its main benefit is that it can be used for different tasks. And you can see the results of evaluation of this model on the general benchmark for biomedical text processing. It includes evidence-based medical information extraction, sentence similarity, question answering, and many others. And advances in NLP can also be used directly in research. For example, for pattern matching in genome sequences. Here, some of the most efficient algorithms nowadays. The most efficient one is for quantum computers, but not all of us have access to quantum computers. So this classic algorithm is used today. And I have shown that NLP has many applications for making biomedical research easier, and thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. So let's support our participant then. So please questions, but let's do it briefly. We have a few minutes. So, and what are the main challenges of the implementation of natural processing from your point of view?
Well, the data is unstructured, and there are not that many labeled data, and it's expensive in manpower and in time to get labeled data. So such models as BERT can be used because they're self-supervised and can be used for solving different tasks.
Do we need any input from physicians?
Yes, in order to say that like this model is valid, we still need to have some input from experts who can validate the models and validate the results. Because like checking on the data set is good, but we need some real input and real world data.
There are a lot of opportunities for natural language processing implementation because we have heterogeneous data, big data from different sources with different structure, with different formats, and it can be applicable to a variety of such tasks. Yeah? So thank you. So I invite our second participant, Alina Polakova, AI for absolute beginners. Please.
Yeah, I think that was okay.
Hold on, still.
Okay, so hello everybody. You can see the topic of my presentation is artificial intelligence for absolute beginners. So the idea of non-living organisms possessing non-living objects, I should say, possessing human intelligence has always occupied the minds of men. And we are now closer to this dream more than ever because artificial intelligence comes, well, it's at our fingertips, not only in everyday life, but also in scientific research. So, where do I?
Let's try one more time.
Huh?
Doesn't work?
Oh, yeah, no. So, what is it exactly? Artificial intelligence is a subfield of computer science aimed at developing computers capable of mimicking human emotions. And the next question is, if artificial intelligence is capable of mimicking human thinking processes, is its structure similar to the human brain? Well, spoiler alert, it is. As known, human neurons have several components, the dendrites, the axons, and the cell body, and connected together, they transmit information through all of the nervous system. And much like that, neural networks have units with parameters joined together. And like human neurons, they have three, I should say, parts or layers. So the first is input layer, which represents the dendrites. The second one is hidden layer, which represents the cell body. And then the output layer, which represents the axon terminals. So inside the hidden layer neurons, the main mathematical processes occur, which take the inputs and process the correct output. So let's take a look at the basic building structure of a neural network, which is a neuron. We can see here a three-input neuron, where the inputs are x1, x2, and x3, and they are all connected to the neuron, and each connection has its own connection weight, so weight 1, weight 2, and weight 3. Now, a bias is an additional input to a neuron, and it is always 1, and it has its own connection weight. Unfortunately, it's not shown in the picture. And the activation function is, well, basically a mathematical function which brings nonlinearity to the system. So as we can see here at the formula, first inputs x1, x2, and x3, they get multiplied by their weights, and then there goes an addition of all the weighted inputs with the bias. And then this whole sum undergoes the activation function. So a weight represents the strength of the connection between the units. So if the weight from node 1 from node 2 is more than 0, that means that neuron 1 has more impact on neuron 2. If the weights are close to 0, that means that input does not have almost any connection to the output, so it doesn't interfere with that. And if the weight is less than 0, that means that increasing this input will decrease the output. So, as we can understand, a weight decides how much influence the input will have on the output. So, in general, AI ingests the information we give it, it processes it, and finds patterns or correlations, and then it uses these patterns to predict the future states of the problem we gave it. So AI programming focuses on three main cognitive functions. This is learning, this is reasoning, and this is self-betterment, self-correction. So learning processes are focused on acquiring data and then finding the algorithm to make this data into actionable information. And then reasoning process is focusing on choosing the right algorithm to do that. While in self-correction processes is pretty much self-explanatory, they are used for fine-tuning the whole neural network and making it providing us the best results possible. So as field of artificial intelligence grows larger, the confusion between the terms artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning rises, and let's clear these things up. So as we discussed, artificial intelligence is a science, much like biology. And then machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence, and it provides systems with the ability to automatically learn and improve from experience without being explicitly programmed. And in bioinformatics, the studies of DNA and protein sequences, they often have such problems as homolog findings or varied sequence alignment or searches for sequence patterns. And to address these terms, we can use machine learning. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning, and it uses the neural network that I described previously to analyze different factors with a structure that is similar to neural network of humans. For example, in a recent study, Steve Finkelbeiner's lab used a convolutional neural network to identify with high accuracy dead cells among the population of live cells. So the network was trained using less than 100 million or 100,000, so it's still a big number of images. And the convolutional layer found a pattern between the dead cells and live cells, and when given the unlatent data, the network was able to identify dead cells and live cells with very high accuracy. So, what are the five key differences between machine learning and deep learning? Machine learning requires more human intervention to get results. Deep learning requires far more powerful hardware, and it also generates results instantaneously, while machine learning takes a bit longer time to do so. So machine learning tends to structure data like Excel sheets, and deep learning networks can process unstructured data like images or genomes. So that deep learning enables more complex and autonomous programs. So I hope I was able to shed some light on basic principles of artificial networks. And I want to end my presentation with a quote from Andrew Ng, who said that AI is a new electricity. It will transform every industry and create huge economic value. And technology like supervised learning will have an impact on every sector, from healthcare to manufacturing, from logistics and retail. Thank you for your thank you.
You really mentioned, so you introduced all of the basic definitions in one presentation, so I'm really impressed. And do you have any questions actually regarding deep learning? Yeah, please, you can just you can do it.
I have two questions. First, you have indicated analogy with human brain, and it was your first or second slide.
Yes.
But in the human brain, you do not have bias, you do not have weight.
Yes.
Principally, it is possible to shift, for example, depolarization potential by chemical agents, but it certainly doesn't connect with calculations on our brain.
Yes, yes.
What does it mean? It means that actually it is not real analogy. It is just
Interesting concept. So when first computer scientists tried to develop something that was human brain-like, they decided to use the neural structure, just three those things, the neurons, the dendrites, the cell body, and the axons. Later, they understood that when we are processing information, sometimes when it doesn't directly have any value, the neuron doesn't activate, and which is why we have this bias. So this is clearly just a mathematical concept and is used in neural networks to make sure that all the neurons are activated during the mathematical calculations, even if the inputs are zeros. So if I go back to the formula, we have access, and if they are zeros, the activation function will have nothing to work with, and the neuron will not activate. And which is why we have bias, which is always 1. So no matter what inputs are, the neuron will get activated. So nothing to do with biology, just pure mathematical.
okay. And maybe the second question. At the beginning, you have mentioned on the influence on science. Do you really believe that it can influence on basic science, on basic research? I understand that this technology is extremely useful for applications, yes, but concerning influence on the basic research,
Yes.
I would suggest that the influence is more negative.
Well, yes, it has several problems. I first started learning about artificial intelligence because I needed it in my research. See, I am a microbiologist and I'm currently working on developing a metabolic network using the whole genome sequences. And when I was connecting the reactions to the genes, I thought to myself that they are not working every gene at the same time in the cell, right? So they activate under certain conditions, they undergo repression under other conditions, and how do we see that? How do we understand when the genes turn on and when the genes turn off? And I found an article about deep learning, which is implemented in this question, and an algorithm finds the transcription sites binding in the genome depending on the basis of the genome DNA, so A, B, C, D. So I think this is really useful, at least for my research, and also for many other researchers. I also was involved into a project where we did a metabolomics study of many strains, and the data that we acquired was enormous. And one way to do the calculations to make it easier for humans to process is for it to undergo machine learning or deep learning processes to make it more structured. So this is good. Thank you.
It was brilliant. The first question I heard quite often from biologists. So we cannot simulate with high precision all of the process, biological processes with mathematical equations, and we can continue this discussion a bit later. And your second question, actually, I think you mean probably black box problem or interpretability. We cannot interpret all of these issues inside of deep learning operation calculations, but we can facilitate with these all of the calculations and variety of tasks can be done with deep learning, machine learning, and only a help and additional input from computational power team. But of course, there are many other issues that should be considered regarding the that should be interpretable. So anyway, we can.
May I ask concern the application which you have mentioned?
Yes.
You can find solutions for your particular biological task, which you have described. But could you prove that the solution is the only solution, that it is impossible to find another solution?
Well, from my perspective now, I'm a second year's master student.
Because I think with such technology, you cannot answer this basic question.
Right, you're absolutely right, because when we think about deep learning processes, even the computer scientists sometimes can't really describe what's going on inside this hidden neural layer, so they can't actually say what the system is doing, but by evaluating the results, we can see the correlations or the patterns that the system used to make the differences. So it's basically a fancy statistics thing, and it really influences how we process big data, so big amounts of data. Probably there are some other mechanisms, but I'm unaware of that. I think that in case of genomes and in case of metabolomics data or any other study that we have, like really intense and large Excel sheets that are very hard to process with just human brain. This technology is useful to make it more easy to understand and to present to the conferences and just scientific publications.
I think we can resume the discussion on. Or you have.
Do we have more time or not?
Please.
Please guess.
Yeah.
So actually, I do not entirely agree with what you said. We do not have a weight function. And you can be now the referee. So my idea is that you have a neuron, and the neuron receives information by the dendrites from other cells. And it is pretty much important for the further processing of the signal where a synapse is attached, whether it's close to the axon or not. And my understanding, and you can now say, you can comment this, since you're the speaker, whether this is the weight or not.
Well, I think yes. I mean, I am as much of a dummy as everybody in this auditorium, so this is a completely new information for me. But I agree with you that when the axons are connected together in a cell, their connections have its weight, and when the neurons are activated, that means that it's possibly the same as the way we described here. But I really think that the more
the weight should correspond to the depolarization potential.
Yes, I think so.
But it cannot be changed by this way. It can be changed by some chemical agents, but it doesn't connect with populations.
Well, this is the problem of computer. Yeah, the problem of computer science and biology science. So yes, we cannot emulate the exact process that occurs in neuron on a computer model because this is extremely hard. What we can do is use mathematical approximation. So, say when the neuron gets depolarized, it affects or it doesn't affect the neuron next to it. So if it affects the neuron next to it, then the weight is positive in the scientific model. If it doesn't affect the neuron next to it, then the weight in the model is zero. If the neuron gets depolarized and transmits information, but it decreases the functioning of the neuron next to it, then the weight is negative. So this is how it can be interpreted.
I can only add that we have a list of activation functions that can be used for different kinds of tasks.
Yes.
This is about different mathematical equations, but it's really a bit difficult, I'd say, challenging to explain for non-mathematicians. And we cannot simulate, as we already was said, with a high precision all of the biological processes with mathematical equations. But we tried it to work. Actually, what the equation is actually with accuracy, and it depends on a particular task.
So when we
Variety of-
have our experiment, we already have somewhat of a prediction of what our results should look like. Whether this is a linear correlation or which is some kind of a weird function thing when it goes up and down. And for linear correlation, you don't actually need a deep learning system because there are like normal functions to do the statistical calculations. But when you don't exactly know how to interpret your results, you can use these things and activation functions which stand for complex functions and complex mathematical concepts. So,
But if it's not linear, there is a high probability to find a local minimum.
Yeah.
If this function
Yes,
is not
yes.
linear, you can find.
Okay, during this week, we'll explain you different kind of approaches, how to deal with them from the mathematical point of view. It's kind of different optimization and so on. But now, unfortunately, we don't have much time, and just thank you. So now I invite our third speaker, Ethan Shimon. And please correct me if I said something wrong. With AI is not magic. Please. Present.
Hey everyone. Okay, hello everyone. We're here to talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning. And my goal today is to actually explain how it actually works. Explain that it's not magic. Because we know we have this supervised, unsupervised, reinforcement learning, all sorts of different systems, language processing, visual recognition. But they're too scary and too complex to look at right now. So we're going to talk about supervised learning and classification using a neural network. We're going to build the network first, then retrain the network, then we verify the network's accuracy using physics. We'll look at that in a moment. So we're using a perceptron that's we're already familiar with because of the previous speaker, but we're going to look at it more specifically and actually at the mass, which I was always saying. So here we have the input features, which is the input neuron layer, and those can be square meters of a house or a number of bad neurons in order to predict the final process. This can be body parameters of the patient to predict patient's gender. Something like that. Then there's our hidden layer. This is where the calculations actually begin, the processing begins. As you know, each data parameter has its assigned weights, which are basically the importance of the spectrum. And these values are multiplied by the weights, which is denoted here, and the bias is added. Bias, it's a different thing, but it's just for convenience. Then it's all summed up, bias is added, and then activation function is applied for non-linearity. So it's basically turning some kind of arbitrary number into some norm, for example, 1 or 2 for binary classification, or the amount of classes for each class. And then here's the output layer, which is basically presenting us the final decision. And here's just a more practical example to fully grasp the concept. Here we can see how we have 3 input neurons. Those are values passed into and here's the processing begins. The first neuron of the hidden layer. You see each factor has its corresponding weight. And the input is multiplied by its weight. Input multiplied by its weight. And then summed up together. All this is over here. And we have the bias. We get some result. So it's really big number, so we need to push it down to meet our expectations. So 0 to 1. So we apply the activation function, which is right here, and we get our final output result. Which is 0 to 3 is pretty close to 1, so we should say this output is 1. It's just get the mathematical. So what is this perception? Actually, if you look at it this way, it's just a big massive function which matches the input A to output B. And in order for our network to perform well, we actually just need to optimize this function for this specific task we're working. And this is made by classical backpropagation, and I just want to quickly intuitively explain. Right now we have built a network. Now it's something else. Now we're working on training the network. Instead of learning about training data, which is some data points and some labels assigned to it. So, for example, apple picture and an apple label, banana picture, banana label. So, first we feed the data point into the system. So remember, just some inputs. And then, at the first run, our system is initialized absolutely randomly. So the weights are just random. And all this process of estimation, bias addition is just made randomly. And this network performs awfully. So what we do, we get the label for this data point. And here, just before outputting the result, we compare the result of the network to the actual true label. And because it's all math, it's all numbers, we can calculate the error, how badly, to assess how badly the network works. And now this error can be propagation because it's being propagated back from the error, it's being propagated back to the weights. And we calculate the relative error of each weight, each neuron, each neuron, in order to optimize the whole system. And doing this iteratively, over and over again with each data point from our training set, we can get pretty decent results. And, to look at this process more scientifically, more visually, this is usually made by an algorithm called gradient descent. And on this graph, the vertical axis, the height, represents our error, and the horizontal plane, the horizontal coordinates are basically our weights, all of that. So our goal is to go from a high error. By changing our horizontal positions, we need to go to lower error. So you see how we change the weights and just go down on our error function. That's why it's a gradient descent, descending gradient. So just a quick recap. First, we build the network, of course, and then we run it randomly. It performs awfully, and each time we're optimizing a bit, considering the global error of the system, and then propagating it back according to each weight, importance of each neuron. And iteratively, the system becomes more and more precise for this task we're working on. And finally, just verify the accuracy of the network using some other test data, which is also labeled, but the system has never seen it before, so that it's not like testing the data is being trained on. So essentially, this is how the perception works, just like the basic building block for bigger structures that are too big to talk about right now. So yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Awesome. Are there any questions from audience? Or I can ask you actually, what is the main difference between the supervised and unsupervised learning?
Supervised learning is very close to this idea of a function, where you have some expected results you want to get. For example, the label of this certain C of inputs. And unsupervised learning is more used for just general data analysis, where you have nothing to predict, but you just want to get some insights from the data itself. This is data clustering and finding the overall patterns and dependencies in the data distribution, but not predicting some certain thing that you expect for the model.
Yeah, I can just only add that supervised learning requires really huge input from physicians in order to label the data. Yeah, so to deal with these things.
Yeah.
Is it clear for anybody from nano side now? What is the difference? Yeah. So that was the idea to get familiar with these fundamental things.
Yeah, of course, there's just too much information to process right now. You just get this feeling that it's not magic, as we said before. Everything in the world can be represented numerically. That's how we operate with it. Actually, just make sense of it.
It looks like we have one session.
Just one question. You have spoken about randomization, but on your slide there was feedback to influence of error on the initial parameters. How it works together with randomization and this feedback?
Maybe this was comparable with that.
And which step do you have randomization?
Oh, no, as I said, we initially generate random weights, but then each time we iteratively change these weights. So randomization is only applied once in the beginning to just get the starting point. Then from here we're getting to this minimum that we want to get.
But if you make randomization only once, there is a probability that you will find just a local minimum.
Yes, absolutely. That's why you can just put this training in a for loop for like 100 times and find the optimal.
It means that you can necessarily repeat randomization, yeah?
Oh yes, we can just try out different random seeds or random positions. Yeah. Try to find that. So there are actually solutions to that. But yes, the randomization is the only way once, and now we go from this point to some minimum that satisfies us.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, Jan Bauer, University of Hamburg. So to me, it always seems that deep learning is essentially a big gradient descent problem. So that's also the reason why the neural networks have their renaissance lately in the deep learning field, because with the GPU computers and the high level of parallelization, you can actually very efficiently compute let's say you can compute these gradient descent stuff for like millions of weights and biases, which was not available before. And the neural networks are available since decades. So my question is, are you aware of any application where deep learning or neural networks perform better than a rather specialized model, whatever, or any more deterministic, more explainable model like whatever force or any other system that you can train, where you really like try to understand like what the data is and how it works, where you first try to understand the structure of the data and then learn a model rather than blindly throwing deep learning at it? So like, are you aware of any field where deep learning really, or neural networks really work better than like a machine learning system that's directed to task?
Well, so you're asking if in some cases just a general deep learning model can outperform a task-specific one, yes?
Yes, are you aware of any application case?
Well,
I mean, it's a big pipe.
It's a bit challenging to answer, actually.
Okay, yeah. We
I'm
can.
not really aware of, but I believe that, visual recognition and visual analysis and convolutional neural networks is just this brilliant example of this generalization where test cases.
Yeah.
And in this way they generalize it very well.
That's also highly unstructured data. But people discuss about lunch.
That's what I
So we can resume this discussion during lunch, and actually we do normally some comparison. We try machine learning and deep learning approach, and then compare the accuracy and other parameters. Also possible answer. Yeah, thank you. Let's our next participant. Please, Irina Makovska, using AI in medicine.
Hello, dear participants. I'm very happy to be here. It's an honor for me, and my presentation will be short in comparison with previously great presentations. What our presentation use artificial intelligence in medicine. As for me, I study and I work with spread of dangerous disease, zoonotic disease, and for me it's very important how to use artificial intelligence because I'm using geographic information system for spread and for monitoring different diseases. So, according to artificial intelligence in medicine, I'm sorry. Artificial intelligence in medicine is the use of the machine learning models to search medical data and uncover insights to help improve health outcomes and patient experience. Currently, the most common rules for artificial intelligence in medical settings are clinical decision support and imaging analysis. If we talk about clinical decision support tools, artificial intelligence help providers make decisions about treatments, about medications, about mental health and other patients' needs by providing them with quick access to information and research that's relevant to their patient. If we can speak about medical imaging, artificial intelligence are being used to analyze computer tomography scans, X-rays, or also magnetic resonance images and other images for lesions and other findings that human radiologists might miss. In medical, on this slide you can see some link of article which I can find on the frontiers, and according to this information, article they indicate and they discover that artificial intelligence in developed countries using different applications for mobile phones in different options and different categories. For example, in cardiology, for protection of population, also in pulmonary medicine, for interpretation of pulmonary function tests, also in endocrinology, for educating and monitoring patients with diabetes, also is gastroenterology, from using for indicate different cancer in gastroesophageal reflux disease also. And neurology. In this case, most important one disease, epilepsy, and for specific application, people can use and can monitoring different patients, not patient, but patient. And also in computational diagnostic of cancer in histopathology, as well as imaging and validation of base technology. If we can speak about COVID situation in different countries today, very common using different application in Apple, for example, Apple mobile application in order to monitoring different state of patient, and it will be, I think it will be future for each of us, monitoring situation and can use different new opportunities of artificial intelligence. I'm so sorry for my presentation.
Everything is okay.
Thank you for your attention.
So you did actually nice examples from video practice, and I personally involved with some research. I involved with some maybe cardiovascular disease research, or pulmonology.
I not start with this.
Okay, but so,
For me, it was interesting as for me as a vegetarian, as a studying vegetarian medicine, so as well as medicine. So I'm not expecting this.
but now if you all of you can imagine how many possible applications we can see in medicine with variety of heterogeneous data, CT, MRI images, and then time series, variety of biomedical signals from ECG to EEG. Photodismography actually is quite popular today and can a bit replace ECG signal with smartwatch. So variety of helpful applications. Yeah. So, are there any questions?
I do not expect so.
It doesn't seem to be the case, so thank you. So, and I'm happy to introduce our next participant, Valery Arol. AI insights into tumor heterogeneity and magnetic nanotherapy. Please. Five minutes.
Thank you. Morning, AI and Nano nerds. I would like to offer you artificial intelligence insight into tumor heterogeneity and magnetic nanotherapy from the National Cancer Institute of Ukraine, which hopefully happens to be just a few blocks away from here, where I'm working, the Department of Radiology and Department of Biomedical Engineering at the National Technical University, where I've been training. So one of the first key features that malignant tumors and all cancers have is the heterogeneity. It is both structural, morphological, and metabolic or functional. And since tumor heterogeneity manifests as chaotic dynamics with stochastic variations across different levels of organization, it is possible that from the concept of non-linear dynamics, or the chaos theory, cancer is defined as a complex, adapting system in which perturbations occurring at different levels of structural hierarchy induce bifurcations, which bifurcations of the behavior, which changes in signaling curve that lead to different characteristics of the tumor on different levels. And this is important because we could now assess the heterogeneity of tumors using imaging, and it is crucial to quantify or objectify this heterogeneity. So here, what I offer you at this slide is two demonstrative images. One is of a pigmented nevus or a mole, and a malignant cutaneous melanoma. And we performed textual analysis, which is one of the branches of artificial intelligence. And I'm sure you've all heard that these days there are many FDA-approved software, as well as research fields where they use artificial intelligence to differentiate or tell the difference between the benign tumors and malignant tumors. And what we have shown is that based on the irregularity of the contour and the heterogeneity based on differences in energy of brightness levels, there were statistical differences between malignant tumor and benign tumor, which is which mirrors the phenomenon that malignant tumors are more heterogeneous as it is with its characteristics. Also, it isn't just limited to diagnosis. But here what we see are the images of magnetic nanocomplexes. We now refer to nanocomplexes as these are nanoparticles plus anti-tumor drugs. So these are the nanocomplexes. And you see here the distribution of magnetic nanocomplexes on their own in the medium and the distribution of magnetic nanocomplexes when we apply the magnetic field. And what is even more interesting that we try to assess the difference in tumor heterogeneity based on histological sections. And as we can see, there were differences in the fractal analysis as one of the tools to assess chaos or let's say heterogeneity in this case in the studied regions of interest or objects, and we see that there are differences in the fractal dimension between magnetic nanocomplexes with the magnetic field and without, and we see a higher fractal dimension, as well as in the tumor sections. It is we show that the application of the magnetic field led to higher fractal dimension, which allows us to get into the conclusion that this tissue is more heterogeneous than this one. And in the nearest future, as you know, magnetic nanocomplexes could represent qubits, as those used in quantum computers, as we could regulate or manipulate the spins of unpaired electrons in magnetic nanocomplexes, as those are qubits, and this could be used for multi-dimensional quantum algorithms for artificial intelligence. And I hope there comes a day when there goes in a patient and says, I have memory problems, and we prescribe them magnetic qubits, remotely controlled by our cell phones. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. You touch a bit on our dynamics. I really like it. So, are there any questions? Please.
So first, at the beginning, you have mentioned on bifurcations, point on nonlinear dynamics, and so on. But let's consider it the usual way of development of cancer. Photon is common to, for example, water, formation of radicals. This radicals leads to mutation. This mutation leads to cancer. Where is the place for bifurcation?
Well, we definitely now know that the interaction of free radicals, recombination reactions, follows stochastic chaotic dynamics too. So here are different possibilities of the product of interaction of radicals, and now there's a growing body of modeling using artificial intelligence of protein conformation and free radical reactions too.
But I think this is usual stochastics. It's not how it is possible to write here the equation, differential equations to get bifurcation point.
This is a good
Because it's usual stochastics.
Not always, actually. This is a question. Yeah. When we are dealing with non-stochastic data.
But the thing about cancer, you're right, because I understand now. The question is about the bifurcation, sorry. The thing about cancer is that there are periods when it behaves as stochastic, but there are also periodic windows where the behavior goes back to periodic. So the question is still open, but I hope I was able to get some explanation for everyone. So
Just briefly.
Some calculations of fractal dimension. As I understand this, you have analyzed the border of some characteristic points on the image.
we use the box counting method at different levels. On the slide here, I showed dermoscopy images and the nanoparticles. We also used a box counting method.
How did you calculate this dimension?
Using the software provided by National Health Institute of USA, we call image J, and using the box method, we calculated fractal dimensions.
So, hot topic to discuss. So, and I'm happy to introduce our last participant, this, Vladislav Yosipенko. And actually, artificial intelligence, do we need medical doctors? That is the question. Please. So 5 minutes, please.
I respect to everyone. Please continue to the previous speakers. I'm not a programmer, I'm a doctor, that's why there will be not a huge formula in my presentation. I just want to inform you about the use of artificial intelligence in medicine and inform maybe it's not common in Ukraine, but in the wide world it can be. So first of all, to become a doctor, we study a lot, for example, from 7 till 9 years of our study in medical school, and this years even without a clinical resident. And even after all these years, it puts the correct references. It's a very difficult process in which doctors can make a medical error. And according to the World Health Organization, in Ukrainian, each day died from 5 till 7 people due to the medical errors. For example, in United States of America, the probability of medical errors is 9.5%. So I want to tell you about how we can improve this diagnosis treatment by the use of artificial intelligence. And I start with maybe easiest is some medical devices. I know that most of us have some fitness trackers, smartwatches, etc., and they monitor our pulse, our blood pressure, our saturation, etc. And this information can help the doctors to form medical reports to get more information about the patient. And for example, in USA was some story when a man while running got the heart attack, and Apple Watch, they analyzed this information and got the changes in their pulse and called the ambulance. Next way to use the artificial intelligence is the diagnosis of disease. And first what I want to point in is that sneezing disease. During our respiration, our organism creates a lot of gases, but not only the carbon dioxide and oxygen. So but our nose is not sensitive for these gases. That's why we use the AI technologies, which will be more sensitive than human nose. And for example, this technique we use for get the information about some disorders like cancer, for example. Next one is the localization of pain. In this case, very often doctors can got the true information about the localization of pain because very difficult, for example, is in children because people who have some mental disorders. Speaking about the pain, so in this pain, there's some essentials. They got information about our reaction of our skin, reaction of our blood vesicles, reaction of our muscles, and according to that information, they really show the true localization of the pain. And the last one is identify risk and advantage. It's like a previous speaker thought, it's about some type of cancer. I know that sometimes the machine can found a lot of imaging of nerves. They can found only one melanoma, it's dangerous type of a cancer. Also, I use for the accelerating drug development. Pharmacy companies spend a lot of money for this, and in this case, it will be automate most of the manual work. As well as for scientists, we know that sometimes work with the statics is very boring. Yes, that's why this artificial intelligence help in this situation for us. And also it accelerates the development of clinical trials, automatic identification for relevant candidates, and etc. So one more thing I want to speak about is personalized treatment. So personalized treatment will help us doctors to put the correct treatment and the patient will get the minimal side effects of this treatment. And there are a lot of examples using of AI in the medicine. For example, we have the robot nurse in Italian. It's very common due to the working in the with COVID patients. We have the robot surgeon, etc. So, what about the question? Do we need a doctor if we have the artificial intelligence? Obviously, then artificial intelligence can change the doctors, but working together, doctors and the artificial intelligence, we can improve and save our patients. So thank you for the question.
What do you feel about this? Maybe artificial intelligence tools? Yeah.
Well, actually, what I feel about the first two speakers, it was I afraid this huge formula, yes, but now it's more, I understand more about the AI, and I hope that AI will help us to save the health of our patients.
Yeah, definitely agree with you. So, the room of opportunities for medical doctors to get some benefits from machine learning, deep learning, and other natural language processing approaches. Yeah.
Of course, it's not the same like in doctors, because doctors have the creative thinking, the doctors have the empathy, etc. But it will be a great part, a great opportunity to improve our work.
Great, sounds great actually. Please, question.
You said that in USF, for example, doctors make error in approximately in 10% cases. And I heard that neural networks and artificial intelligence make errors also in 10 or 20%. I suppose maybe it is dangerous for patients to use artificial intelligence and make errors. Or how do you think?
Of course, even the machine can make a mistake, but I think the artificial intelligence is a young science, yes, and people will work a lot with this and will decrease this probability of mistakes.
Yeah, and I think something also. We should consider any artificial intelligence, machine learning tools only as a decision support. And the question is, who is responsible actually for the final decision? And of course, it's medical doctor. Yeah, please.
Yeah, it is a legal issue at the end of the day. So you can punish a person for doing a mistake or for not caring or being corrupt or whatever, but you cannot punish an AI. So at the end of the day, independent of how you turn it, you will always need a human improving it. And the bigger problem is, like if a human has to use a tool like an AI, then this human being has to at least understand to a certain degree what's happening there. That's also the reason why we don't have autonomously driving cars everywhere already. So, I mean, the cars can drive much better than most of the people I know in my family,
Yeah.
excluding myself. Right? But there's a hell of people I know, and I would rather drive with an AI operated car, but at the end of the day, the AI is not responsible, but the human being is, and that makes a difference in our legal system. So you need to understand how the AI is working, how the tool is working, such that you can be held responsible. That is one of the bigger issues in AI usage in medicine. It's a favorite AI. So the AI has to tell why it comes to a certain conclusion, if you want it like this, right? Such that doctors can improve on that. So there's still somewhat too wrong. But other than that, you're totally right, I would say. So there's many examples where machine learning AIs are outperforming human doctors by far.
That's a crucial addition. I totally agree with you. Other questions? ask questions because we are run out of time, actually a bit. Now in 1 minute, doesn't seem to be this, so we don't have any questions anymore. Now we're approaching our lunchtime, and then I would like to make some announcements for Nano participants. Please come to Anna and give a presentation. And this question now about lunch. Where is lunch located?
Lunch is where the cafeteria is, I understood.
Yeah.
I just wanted to take the chance that the person who spoke last from the auditory is Jan Baumbach, who is another speaker from Germany. You will hear his presentation, I don't know when. Wednesday. So nice that you are with us already. And one brief comment, which I think I didn't hear everything, but obviously the first speakers could make it understandable what is AI to this physician here. This is really nice. So you picked the point to make it simple. Next stage is then to make science understandable for your grandmother, for the nurse, for the butcher. This is actually then something we would like to see at Science at the Bar. So now lunchtime.